What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we have a fantastic episode coming your way today. We're touching all four corners of combat sports in this one. We're talking UFC Macau, a little bare knuckle because Darren Till made his debut. We're talking some boxing because, let's face it, O'Shaquie Foster put on one of the best performances we have seen all year. And of course, we have to talk some wrestling because RAF happened and it was star-studded. As always, the timestamps will be below. If there's a particular combat sports discipline or topic you're most interested in, you'll know where to find it. But Nick, we are going to start with UFC Macau.
Let's do it.
Song Yadong, Deiveson Figueiredo. So there's a lot to take away. So first of all, good card, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you were up as early as I was. I was live streaming starting at 6:30 a.m.
You're a better man than me, man. I had to catch the highlights and all of the replays afterwards.
Good stuff. 9 out of 13 fights ended in finish.
Mm-hmm.
Good submissions, good knockouts, lots of first-round finishes and things like that.
Yep.
Honestly, some mismatches on the card, which we'll get into. But let's start with the top. Song Yadong fighting in front of his home crowd. And we didn't realize how important Song's win was going to be for the Chinese crowd until we realized that the Chinese fighters went 0-6 prior to Song fighting. So, we could not allow, or China would simply not allow for a clean sweep to happen against their fighters on home turf. But Song Yadong looked like a true professional, and they're 28 years old, really putting his game together. Deiveson, I have some criticism for him and some things that I think that he probably either needs to hang it up or fix. But first, let's talk Song Yadong. What'd you think?
I thought it was actually really impressive how he was able to go out there and wipe the slate clean after, like you said, all the other Chinese fighters were unable to get their hand raised. And he looked great. There wasn't a whole lot going on. I'm leaning towards you. Like, Figueiredo wasn't really allowing for much of a fight to take place. That's why it wasn't like a highlight full couple of rounds. But the submission was actually pretty impressive, the way he was able to notify what was happening, immediately push his hips out, and then get to the position where he had enough space to get the guillotine lock. Now, it wasn't the tightest guillotine, and it was arm in, so we understand that that's usually not quite as tight as if you can get both arms around the neck. But it made Figueiredo a black belt, a former world champion tap. So you have to give Song Yadong some credit for getting a former champion out of there like that. But I do think that there was a little bit of a quick tap on display from Figueiredo. And while Song Yadong needed that win, it probably felt a little bit easier than what he thought he was going to have to do to get back into the winning ways, right? Bantamweight's been so stacked for so long, and he's been like this guy that's like slowly but surely moving towards the top of the division. And of course, he's stubbed his toe and didn't get his hand raised against Sean O'Malley, but it feels like if there is a Chinese champion in the male divisions, it could be Song Yadong. And I think it's good to see him back in the win column over a former champion. We always talk on this channel how rare former champions are to come across in this sport. I have a hard time figuring out who he should fight next, because most of the time when you come off a win and your last win was against a guy further out of the rankings than you, that it's only fair that the UFC gives you somebody ranked higher than you. But bantamweight's kind of stacked right now at the top and a little bit bottlenecked, right?
Well, everybody's also already paired up to some degree.
Exactly. So matchmaking's kind of taken care of at the top 5. And then we also know that the rematch between Merab and Peter Yan will be announced at some point soon. So I'm interested to see who they give him next. If it's not somebody further ranked outside of the top 5 than him, the only person, we were looking at the rankings, the only person left without a dance partner is Umar Nurmagomedov. And I don't know if Song Yadong, after just getting back in the win column and looking to make a title run again, wants to sign the dotted line against Umar Nurmagomedov, but it may just be the only option for him.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's going to have to take his pick, right? Because it's like, okay, who's at the top of 35? It's Peter Yan.
Yep.
Obviously, Song would love to have a rematch with him. Corey Sandhagen, he would love to have a rematch with him, lost to both of them. Sean O'Malley, also somebody that Song Yadong lost to, but Sean is paired up with Arman Tsarukyan. So Corey Sandhagen is fighting Mario Bautista.
Yep.
Sean O'Malley's fighting Arman Tsarukyan. I'm drawing the top 5 off of memory right now. Merab is likely going to fight Peter Yan. We'll talk about RAF and how he injured his nose again last night. So we'll see. Who knows if that's going to cause some delay. But it really kind of is Umar, right?
Yeah.
Umar is the only one, to my knowledge, as we sit here and record, that I can't think of being booked as having a dance partner. And it's like, hey, listen, you're number 5 right now. You
Yeah.
just beat Figgy, who's almost 40 and was a few positions back in the ranking. So if you don't stay at 5, you may move to 4.
Yeah.
Like you're not going up further than that. So you're kind of up against the wall there,
Right.
until you beat somebody who's truly elite in the division. And that's been kind of the problem with Song. Every time he's paired up with a title challenger, or he's put into
A top 3.
top 3, or what is considered or touted to be a title eliminator sort of fight, he tends to lose those
Right.
fights. Now he's only 28 years old, so he's making improvements and he's looking better. I can't really give much of an opinion or critique about the performance because he looked great.
Yeah.
But again, he was fighting an opponent who didn't really seem to want to be there. And that's where I want to kind of turn the conversation toward Deiveson a little bit. Deiveson literally, I don't think, was even landing or throwing one shot on average per minute.
Yeah.
Deiveson always comes out wide stance. He always leans far back and he looks to counter. But it just seemed to me last night, and I said this on the live stream because I just like to shoot from the hip and
Yeah.
tell the truth as I see it. Whether I change my opinion later or not is to be determined. But when I see something, I got to call it out.
Right.
It seemed to me like Figgy was in there to collect a paycheck.
Yeah. Phoning it in.
One thing we know about former champions, they're usually on high-paying contracts because when you become a champion or when you get into the top 5 or top 3, the UFC tends to renegotiate with you and give you a pretty good deal.
Sure.
Deiveson was a great fighter at 125. He was a champion that had wars that some went his way, some went the other way. He had those, how many times did he fight Brandon Moreno? 4 or 5 times. Good fights. And so I would imagine that Deiveson gets paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so it feels to me like at this stage of his career, he knows he's not going to be a champion at 135. He knows that he's not going to make a reasonable title run, and that's evidenced in the way that he's fighting.
Right.
And so it's like, hey, look, if I can collect $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, a few more times and just do that and tap when the going gets tough, I'm going to take that out all day long.
Get a nice trip to China out of it.
Yeah, that's what I don't love, because to me it seemed like Deiveson was in there to collect a paycheck and nothing else. And if that's the case, I think he needs to hang it up, because we saw Tony Ferguson. Now, while I think Tony put a more valiant effort in those last few fights than Deiveson did, it's kind of the writings on the wall, like, hey, they're going to keep pairing this guy up with good fighters because, as you said, he's a former champion, and we know that there's not a whole lot of former champions floating around. Like, once you lose your belt, it's hard to get it back. If you don't get it back, your career tends to decline.
Yeah.
It declines. You lose 3, 4, 5 fights. You're like, you know what? Peace.
Yeah.
I'm done. And so for Deiveson, I feel like if he's going to stick around, he needs to actually put forth an effort in these fights.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's not going to put forth an effort in these fights and he's going to demand that he stays around, I think the UFC should feed him to the lions.
Yeah.
I'm talking Alessandro Topuria. I'm talking Kai Asakura.
The stars of tomorrow.
Peyton Talbot.
Yeah.
Let this guy, okay, you want to be that way. Fine, no problem. We revere you and respect you. I don't mean any disrespect towards Figgy over this conversation. I'm not talking about his time at 125. I'm talking about the way he looks now. And if you're gonna fight that way, and we're gonna have to shell out big money for you every time you fight, here's a really tough. I guarantee you, Alexandre Topuria, El Conquistador, is not going to allow Figgy to just stay in that wide stance on the outside. He's going to use that Topuria walk down, and he's going to put the big hands on him. So that's what I feel like. He's either got to step up the output, really look like he's trying in there, or retire, or get fed to the lions.
Yeah, and the future stars of tomorrow, there's plenty of them at 135. You said Topuria. I think that's a great option. What about Ethan Ewing?
Yeah.
That guy's done nothing but heavy lifting for the UFC since he got in on short notice, and he looks damn good. At some point, they're going to start to realize, all right, we're not going to make our money back on Figueiredo fighting and winning, so we need to make the most out of the money that we are going to pay him by building the stars of tomorrow. And a guy like Ethan Ewing would be a great option. Again, Topuria would be a great option. I don't think either of them are booked right now, and so either of those would be fun options. And then, the top 15, we everybody knows the top 5. The top 10 is when it starts to get a little bit hairy, and then the top 15, some people don't even know who all those guys are. But I do think that there's going to be a real case for the Kai Asakuras, who we'll talk about, to be able to jump right into the rankings, into a meaningful spot in the division. And a guy like Figueiredo, being that he's a former champion, being that, up until last night he had a ranking, it makes sense to like book people that could take those spots that also have a little bit of a name or have some sort of staying power in the division. And like you were saying, I think Ethan Ewing, Topuria, Beksat Almakhan even, and then Kai Asakura being the newest 135er. He was unranked going into the fight last night, but I would assume even though he beat an unranked Cam Smotherman, he made it look damn easy. It was a highlight reel knockout to the highest level, and that deserves a top 15 ranking in my opinion, especially given the fact that Kai Asakura got into the UFC by debuting in a world title fight. So it tells you the level that they see him at. And at this point for Figueiredo, I love him. I'll always enjoy the Figgy, heyday. And I loved his style, right? He was the 125 guy that could really just like throw heavy power and change shots in a single shot. We don't see that often at flyweight. So I'm a fan of Figueiredo. I always like to see him compete, but yesterday morning, didn't exactly feel like a competitive fight. It felt more like somebody who was in there to collect a check.
Yeah, and I think Kai Asakura is not a bad option. But I was thinking, when I saw Kai Asakura fight, I was thinking more like, okay, if Song Yadong performs well, maybe you put those two together.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't really make sense for the rankings. I think Umar does make more sense.
For sure.
Corey Sandhagen makes sense, but he's booked up.
Yeah.
And then so Kai Asakura, he will be behind where Song is in the rankings. But as you mentioned, he got thrust right into a debut title fight.
Right.
So they're not looking to slow roll Kai Asakura. He's not the youngest guy. He's still in his prime, but he's not the youngest guy. So, when you have a highlight reel knockout like that, everybody says this guy's, striking-wise, one of the best in the division.
Yeah.
His Achilles heel is grappling. We know Song is with alpha male. We know that Song and Uriah Faber and the team is saying, look, this kid came to us with the raw skills, and we've put him together into be a complete mixed martial artist, but more so than that, a fantastic wrestler.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see that happen. Let's see Kai Asakura versus Song Yadong, and let's see whose style wins out, because Song's also very heavy-handed, right?
Yeah.
He can throw big, heavy leather, and so can Kai. So that to me makes sense. For Kai Asakura, I see Song for Song, I see Kai Asakura or Umar. And for Figgy, I think, just pick, roll the dice and pick one of these young, hungry lions that is going to take the fight to him. And it's like, dude, if you're gonna collect a hefty 6-figure check, you're gonna earn it, or you need to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And yeah, there's so many good names coming out of that division, and the division was on full display, in Macau. Well, obviously, the main event being a bantamweight fight, and then the other highlight of the night being Cam Smotherman getting KO'd by Kai Asakura. It just feels like 135 now has a little bit of shifting to do, and I fully expect Song Yadong to kind of stay where he's at in the rankings, but Kai Asakura to jump into the top 15 somewhere in that teen number. Figueiredo is going to slide out of the ranks, and he's going to wind up being one of those guys that is a test and a stepping stone for the future generations. But I think now's the best time to start to feed those young, hungry guys that want to get booked with a former champion more than anything on their climb to the top. Now's a better time, and I guess Figueiredo's on that aspect of his fight career at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, the funny thing that last night or funny thing that stood out rather to me last night. And before we get back into this video, guys, quick shout out to our friends over at Diamond MMA. If you train at all, you know how important it is to protect those precious family jewels. I'm a dad and I'm not done having kids yet. And Nick, he hasn't even started, but we're still looking for a lovely lady for him. Too bad this channel's 97% male. But seriously though, Nick and I were so thrilled when Diamond reached out for this sponsorship, because Nick and I were customers for 8 years before this ever happened. If you take training seriously, whether it's jiu-jitsu, MMA, baseball, hockey, you name it, Diamond is an absolute must for you. So shout out to Diamond MMA. Back to the action. Was that there were so many mismatches on the main card.
Yeah.
And it was odd, right? So Kai Asakura versus Cameron Smotherman. Cameron's a local guy, right? We've seen him fight here in the local scene. I've seen him lose here in the local Houston scene. And that's not to poke fun or disrespect Smotherman, but, this is a guy that's well outside of the top 15 in the UFC. And, has good boxing, has some good power, still very green, still a lot of things to work on. and you bring him in against a guy that you debuted into a title fight.
Yeah.
So the mismatch was drastic. The other mismatch that was even more apparent, even quicker finish, was Sergey Pavlovich versus Taliesin Teixeira. Now,
and it was even easier to understand the mismatch because Smotherman unranked, Kai Asakura at bantamweight unranked. Pavlovich was number 3 in the world last night, or in Macau in the morning, and Teixeira was number 15. So that's like one of those massive jumps,
fresh 15. Like he got there off a beaten Tai Tuivasa and handing him his 7th loss in a row. So who knows if that ranking was even deserved.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I thought that, Pavlovich is one of those guys, and about, 3 or 4 years ago, everybody's like, all right, that's the guy. He's going to wind up in a title fight. And obviously, we know him for being now a veteran of the sport. He's had some amazing performances against really high-level guys. He's always in the top 5. And, ever since he got into the top 10 and sort of made his way into the top 5, he's just been sort of a staple there. He's a little bit older, but he's still built like an absolute cinder block.
Yeah.
And Taliesin Teixeira to me feels like the kind of guy that, even though it doesn't really look like he's ever spent time in a weightlifting room, and that would probably benefit him given the fact that he's so tall and has the reach and stuff, if he could just fine-tune a couple of those aspects. I feel like he gets a little bit wild in there. Obviously, he gets really tall when he's striking, and more importantly, he gets really tall when he's trying to defend shots, and that's why Derek Lewis was able to knock him out the way he did. It's why Pavlovich was able to find the finish. Those are the biggest issues I see out of Taliesin. I think if he could wind up getting himself a little bit more durable, remember, he's 26 years old, and at heavyweight, that is a baby. You know, guys that are 36 can have a ton of success at heavyweight.
He could be 7 to 8 years away from his heavyweight prime, because heavyweight prime is early to mid-30s.
Right. You see, we're talking about 25ers and 35ers. You better get going and into the UFC and have your solid career. By the time 34 rolls around, you're kind of on the back nine.
Yeah.
But Taliesin could very well shake off these couple of losses and really find his footing. Like I said, I think he should find a weight room and really start to pump some weight, because if he could become a more physically demanding guy, given the height and reach and size that he was naturally born into, I think he could be a real problem. But it seems to me like his fight IQ isn't quite there. I think he relies a little bit too much on single shot KO power. But at heavyweight, even in the UFC, look, heavyweight's never been the most technical division, and as of right now, it feels like it's sort of on life support with all of the just nonsense at the top of the division, and the fact that Tai Tuivasa was 0-6 and then somehow went up in the rankings, and Taliesin, I respect him, but he doesn't really deserve a top 15 in the world type of ranking given his skill set. But the fact that he's still in the competition, the fact that he's still in the discussion for the rankings, tells me that if he gets a couple of things adjusted and figured out, I think he actually could make a legitimate run. And it's always fun to see a guy at 6'7" who has knockout power go in there and mix it up a little bit. But I think if he could just curtail his style a little bit, and then of course add a little bit of a more physically demanding attributes to his body, I think he could have more success.
Yeah, and odd matchmaking, I mean, to say the least. What does it do for Pavlovich and what does it do for Teixeira? My fear is that Teixeira is quickly becoming the Aaron Pico of the heavyweight division. This guy came into the UFC undefeated, and then we go ahead and book him at a main event. I think it was in Nashville against Derek Lewis, who's one of the most heavy-handed punchers, probably the most heavy-handed puncher in the history of the sport.
The knockout king.
Knockout king. He doesn't have it tattooed across his chest for nothing.
Right.
There was a video in the gym that came out of somebody getting a body shot from Derek for his birthday.
That's Max. Shout out Max Lemus, Gold Team Max. So that thing went viral, and it was his birthday. So anytime,
happy birthday, Max.
Yeah, happy birthday to Max.
Remind me not to come to the gym on my birthday. But
that's the thing. Anytime it's my birthday, obviously if it falls during the week, I'm going to be at the gym, and I try to keep it nice and quiet. So I'm 32 now. I don't want 32 body shots, and that's usually what it is. But most of the time, Derek Lewis doesn't partake in the body shots for the birthday celebration, and unfortunately for Max, he decided he was going to throw in at least one body shot. So any of the guys who are in the UFC, Yadier Del Valle, I'm sure the body shot from him didn't feel great. Mana Martinez probably put one on Max, didn't feel great. But I think Max is right around that 30 years old age, and Derek Lewis being one of them was just enough to put him on the canvas, and he got to go viral. So shout out to Max.
Shout out Max. Wim Hof famously sits in an ice bath for however many years he's been on this earth. That's how many minutes he sits in an ice bath.
Yeah.
If you proposed me the proposition of 38 for me, it would be body shots. And the final one is from Derek, or 38 minutes in the ice bath. I think I'm choosing the ice bath, but
you'd rather have hypothermia than a busted spleen.
Than heading to the ER. So, but back to Derek Lewis, because I did have a point there before my tangent. Taliesin Teixeira has chin susceptibility.
Yeah.
So he's been knocked out by Derek now in the first minute. He's been knocked out by Sergey now in the first minute. And, those types of knockouts are not easy to come back from.
No.
So, this guy's now going to be outside of the top 15 again. And you have a 26-year-old who's years away from his prime, who you believe in him, right?
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have main evented him in Nashville if you didn't believe in him.
Right.
So a guy that at some point in time you had some level of confidence in, that you wanted to put some marketing behind. You wanted him to be on the marquee poster and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then, now he's been starched by two heavy-handed fighters who were way ahead of him in the rankings. And it's like, what were the matchmakers thinking when it's like, okay, this guy was knocked out cold by Derek Lewis, who's in his 40s now.
Right.
And Sergey Pavlovich, by the way, beat Derek by knockout, and he's 6 positions higher in the rankings and younger, and arguably hits just as hard. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Why don't we throw him up against Sergey?
Well, yeah, and Pavlovich really did have a lot to lose. If he would have been clipped by something big off of Teixeira, he would have slid right out of the top 5 and somewhere around that 9 or 10 spot, unfortunately. Obviously, that didn't happen. He's going to maintain his number 3 position in the division. But it would almost be a blessing and a curse if Taliesin would have won last night against Pavlovich, because if he would have gotten a win over number 3, he's jumping 6, 7, 8 spots into the top 10, and that could be way too much too soon for Taliesin. We've seen him kind of thrown to the wolves a little bit, and we're understanding that maybe he's not the upper echelon right now. But 4, 5, 6 years from now, he could be one of the most skilled heavyweights in the division. A lot of those older names are going to be leaving the scenes and, bowing out to the crowd saying, thank you so much, put the gloves in the center of the octagon and go home. And Taliesin's going to still be around for the next several years. So it's almost better for him to have lost this fight and then slowly ease himself down into the rankings again. Obviously he's going to fight to get back into the number 15 slot, but instead of feeding him guys that are 12 ranking spots ahead of him, give him somebody around his ranking, maybe around his age too, and just start to ease him back in, because I think that Taliesin actually does have skill and he has a great equalizer in power, but too much too soon with Pavlovich.
Yeah, he should be fighting, what was the gentleman's name? Sutherland, that beat Tai Tuivasa.
There you go. That's
they have a common opponent. They both beat Tai. Maybe put him up against somebody like that. But yeah, somebody in the top 5 is way too much, way too soon. And it's funny because when Taliesin was training with Alex Pereira, I always watched the numbers on Kalshi, and I saw people start to kind of creep in the direction of Taliesin Teixeira beating Sergey Pavlovich because he looked decent in some of those striking exchanges. And I was like, not so fast. Sergey Pavlovich is the hardest hitter potentially in all of heavyweight. Yeah. And he showed us last night that there's levels to this game, and there is a huge gap between number 3 and number 15. And I think that's a perfect place to leave the conversation for UFC Macau.
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of great finishes, but we want to get into RAF stuff, right?
Yeah, which actually highlighted the newest heavyweight of the UFC's heavyweight division, and a guy who isn't ranked right now, but you can mark my words and bet your bottom dollar, after International Fight Week, Gable Steveson will be a ranked heavyweight. And by the way, it's so confusing. His name is Gable Steveson, right? And somebody, whoever was announcing the fight, that female who does the RAF, she said Gable Steveson, no problem. But everybody... It's either, they're torn. It's either Gable Steveson or Gable Stevenson. And you can even see people holding up signs for him that says, go Gable Stevenson. And so for me, I was calling him Gable Steveson sometimes. Other times I'm calling him Gable Stevenson. I didn't know until now I understand. His name is Gable Steveson.
Well, you should have just asked me. I feel like I am an expert in all things Steven, as it is my name, right? So when there's an E after the V, it's Steven. If there's no E after the V, it is Steveson. So his name is, in fact, Gable Steveson. And we were just talking about Kalshi and making different markets. Now, they only go through the end of 2027, or sorry, for 2026, who the champion is going to be.
Sure.
As soon as January 1st, 2027 rolls around and Kalshi puts out the prediction odds for who will be the champion at the end of 2028, I would be shocked if Gable Steveson was not on that very short list and probably towards the top of it. This guy, athleticism to the nth degree, right?
Yeah.
This guy's tech falling a medalist on the world stage wrestler,
a UFC fighter.
Yeah, I believe he's with PFL now.
Yeah.
And then immediately doing backflips. Like the athleticism for somebody his size, and the amount of body mass that he holds, but to be able to move it and control, have such good control over his movements to the point that he can tech fall an elite level wrestler and then do a backflip. The heavyweight division has a nightmare on their hands with this guy.
Oh yeah, and Gable's even called out Suzurkayev, and that was actually two people on the RAF card last night that called out Sazarkayev. Kyle Snyder called him out, and then of course Gable Steveson called him out. I think that's really interesting, and I'd love to see that match take place at RAF sooner or later. But it just shows you the level of athleticism that we're dealing with, and I really did like that John Jones being in his corner, but also his wrestling coaches being in his corner was really cool. And Chael Sonnen, we all know he has a ton of heat with John Jones. He has for years. Those two don't see eye to eye. And part of the time it feels like it's a gimmick. Part of the time it feels like they're buddies and he's going to poke fun for clicks and engagement. Yeah. And other times it does feel kind of personal and they actually don't like each other. Maybe not as much as DC hates John Jones, but Chael Sonnen definitely seems like he doesn't have as much love for John Jones as maybe other people do. But it was cool to see him interview John after talking to Gable for a second, and he was like, basically asking John a question that he wanted to trap John with. He was like, how do you feel? Like, do you take any credit for Gable Steveson? He's like, I don't take any credit for this guy's wrestling. I'm here as a friend and a teammate and all that stuff. Those coaches right there are the guys that made him the wrestler that he is, and that's why he's the best in the world. So I thought it was actually a very classy moment. It was fun to see Chael and John Jones right there sharing a microphone. Who knows how it's going to go when those guys do get together, but it was nice to see, and they kept it real classy for Gable Steveson.
Well, I got a match for John. Chael asked John, could we potentially see you in the RAF competition? Why not John versus Chael? Those guys got heat. Why the heck not? I mean, Chael can still wrestle. Obviously, Chael is way too old to be getting in a cage and fighting anybody, especially John Jones. Right. And I think John Jones would probably wear him out on the RAF mat too. But I mean, hell, that'd be a big wrestling match.
Chael Sonnen has never said no to a fight. He's very famous these days. He says fighting is the tough guy industry, and there's never been a bigger group of fake tough guys than the UFC. And one thing for sure is he comes from the OG days of fighting when there wasn't a ton of money to be made, even if you made it to the absolute highest point of the sport. Chael Sonnen's a tough guy, and if you call him out, Jorge Masvidal knows this. He's been talking about fighting Chael Sonnen, and Chael says, I don't pick on guys that are fighting down there and they're that small of guys, but I've also never said no to a fight. So if John Jones does call out Chael Sonnen, I have a feeling we could see the rematch, but not in the octagon where Chael had no chance, on the RAF mats where Chael might actually stand a chance.
Sign me up for that, dude. Let's a few more. Merab Dvalishvili, Frankie the Answer Edgar. Yep. Frankie's a wrestling coach now.
Yeah.
Decorated wrestler himself, former world champion, several divisions higher than Merab.
Yeah.
Obviously this is back in the day. This is not today's MMA world.
When Uriah Faber and Frankie Edgar were 155ers, and now we see guys that are 155ers like think of Jalen Turner. Or Islam Makhachev, right?
Yeah, enormous, right? And Frankie Edgar obviously would be like a 135er of today, and he even walked his career down to that weight class before he left. But for Merab to get in there and perform the way he performed, and then he's doing the Georgian dance and all that, this guy's a star. My only concern for Merab is that he's got this nose injury, and he got hit in the nose again last night, and it looked like it was bleeding. It looked like he was having some irritation with it. So, man, I really want to see that Peter Yan rematch, and I hope that I want these guys to wrestle.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm concerned about with RAF is that one of these guys suffers like an ACL tear.
Yeah.
Or in Merab's situation, we thought he was going to come out with the face mask last night. He did not. He gets a broken nose, and that pushes off the Peter Yan fighter. They just go in a different direction. They put the winner of Sean and Eamon in there with Yan. That would probably be their contingency plan, but I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on that. I hope that nothing is bad with Merab's nose. I want to talk about the wrestling match because Merab, the Machine, might be the most earned and rightful fight name in the UFC.
Yeah, Merab truly is a machine, and we know him as a high-paced MMA fighter, but he brings that exact same energy onto the RAF mats, and he's just bouncing around. It seems like he's the energizer buddy for all things combat sports. Like Frankie Edgar's like, Jesus, how this guy's just jumping constantly. He's moving. Everything's a feint. Everything could be a level change into a shot. It's really hard to understand when somebody's moving at that high of velocity and they're constantly moving. And I agree with you that the headbutts are the one thing that were on display last night that we usually don't see as much of at RAF. For some reason, the RAF matches have been pretty injury free, and everybody's getting through unscathed. Yeah. But last night there were a few headbutts that were in there, and I think Arman had one, but the Merab one did cause his nose to bleed. And Merab's at this point now where he's obviously got mangled ears. He's got the cauliflower on a serious level, but he's got the cauliflower nose, right?
Yeah.
I always said back in the day when I ran into Peter Yan face to face, he's got the cauliflower face, just a grizzled, tough dude with the forehead.
Muay Thai clinch, just rubbing those heads against each other.
Scar tissue galore up here, kind of like Nate Diaz. Merab's going to have a nose that looks like a light bulb by the time his fight career and his wrestling career are over. But I think that the fact that he broke his nose a few weeks ago and even admitted to it in an interview, I think it was with Nina Drama. He was like, yeah, I broke it a few weeks ago. I'm not going to get it fixed. It'll heal on its own. And, I'm like, will it heal on its own? And then, of course, he goes out and wrestles and re-breaks it again. So I don't think he's really too concerned about having the straightest nose in the industry. As long as he's got his world title back, he'll be okay. But if I were Peter Yan, I'd be targeting that nose specifically because we know a couple sharp jabs, maybe a nice to the face could really bust Merab up, and that could be his way to get Merab out of there via finish if whenever the rematch happens.
It's possible. And two more guys I want to touch on with RAF before we move into the Darren Till BKFC and the boxing stuff. So Arman Tsarukyan and Colby Covington.
Yes.
Colby wrestled Chris Weidman, who also is an All-American wrestler and was sizably and visibly much bigger than Colby. It shows you how good Colby is as a wrestler.
Weidman's bodied up.
He's big. I mean, all these guys are having fun with all the supplements that they couldn't take when they were competing in the UFC.
We'll call them peptides.
They're on those peptide. They're on that peptide regimen.
Yeah.
And Arman Tsarukyan is tech falling high level wrestlers. Like this guy is just an athletic freak. We talk about Gable Steveson being an athletic freak. Arman is an athletic freak. Again, this guy's doing nothing inside of the UFC as far as competition goes. And every time one of these RAF events happen on the predictions market, I checked Kalshi, and he's up 4 points as most likely person to be the champion of 155 at the end of 2026. Now, Ilia Topuria still is the most favored, as you would probably imagine, but Arman even more so than Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
Those two guys are squaring up next against each other. We got Gaethje. I'm moving on to the White House. We got Arman versus Colby Covington as a main event. I think they said that was going to be a July card, if I'm not mistaken. So RAF 11, something like that.
Yes.
That is going to be an awesome wrestling match. Probably the toughest test for Arman inside of the I almost said the cage on the wrestling mat so far with RAF. What do you think of that one?
I think it's actually the perfect matchup. And Arman, he was able to go out there and they had their little face off. And Colby, even though he plays the role of Chaos Covington, he is such a respectable guy, and he's always willing to drum up a little business and get a little bit of hype and heat going between somebody. But at the end of the day, they're going to be business partners, and they're going to go into this fight wanting to take each other out, but at the same time there's going to be respect. And anytime somebody can perform inside the competitive environment at a high level and also perform for the fans and get people excited for the fight, I just tip my hat to them. And Arman Tsarukyan, of course, is the viral machine in combat sports right now. I'd say he's the closest thing to crossing over to pop culture that we've had since Conor McGregor, which is crazy because a year ago today, Arman was not anybody's favorite fighter in the UFC. He was a thorn in most people's sides. They were like, all right, he backed out of the fight with Islam Makhachev, never give him a title shot again. Now everybody's begging for Arman to be in title fights, and Arman just can't do anything wrong. He is the Armenian Batman. He looked great. And one thing that stuck out to me about Arman against Muggsy last night, he is a competitor to the highest level. And I think RAF does bring out a more friendly competitive side of him, but as soon as it started to get a little bit chippy, and I think Muggsy might have pushed him in the back, and then Arman's like, yeah, I had to headbutt him because he pushed me. And, that's just Arman being Arman. But as soon as it started to get a little bit chippy, you saw the cleanest shot of the entire wrestling event come from Arman Tsarukyan. A beautiful shot, change levels, shoot in, get to the back, quickly get into a leg lace position, and then he just starts spinning. A high-level wrestler like that. It shows me that not only can Arman compete and kind of have a little bit of fun if he's trying to entertain the crowd, but if you piss him off, he will turn it up. And I think that competitive edge, that ability to just turn into an absolute monster, regardless of what's going on, right? Some people are good at fighting. Some people are good at wrestling. Some people are good at bowling. But if you have that ultimate competitor inside of you and you can flip a script or flip a switch just like Arman did, you're talking about a generational talent. You're talking about somebody who can do things that even the highest level fighters in the world can't do. And that shot sequence to finishing the fight against Muggsy, or finishing the match against Muggsy, was so high level to me. It shows me that he really can go out there. And if Ilia Topuria is who he fights next, I think Ilia Topuria is going to be in for a long night, because Arman Tsarukyan can compete with absolutely anybody at anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm just sitting here flabbergasted. So you think that Arman Tsarukyan is having what you would deem to be friendly and respectable competition inside of RAF?
I
so
do.
Punching Giorgio Poulos, throwing Uriah Faber off the mat, headbutting Muggsy. I dare not even ask what you think he's going to do next time we see him in the cage.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be definitely something you don't want to miss. It's going to go viral. He can't help but go viral every time he does something now, whether he's on a microphone, talking on a podcast or a live stream, or he's out there. Every single event that he's at, the biggest moment belongs to Arman. He got even invited to the MVP card that Jake Paul put on the other day and had the viral moment because he got into a fight with one of the winners, some guy who won. I can't remember his name, but I think they signed him to Contender Series. They brought him out, and then before you know it, Arman is in a scuffle with him in the back, and you got Jake Paul and everybody trying to break up this fight. Arman Tsarukyan matters in all aspects of the sport, and I just think that the competitor inside of him is what people are really tuning in to see. He's not a punk. He doesn't take a step back against anybody, and the fact that he can go out there after spending those last decade or more exclusively working on MMA, the fact that he can go out there and out wrestle people who haven't ever put on MMA gloves and aren't really planning on having an MMA or a UFC career at all, and he can go out there and tech fall high level wrestlers, just speaks volume to the competitive nature of Arman Tsarukyan.
Arman is becoming a bigger star by the day, and I believe Ilia Topuria is taking note of it, because in all of the interviews that Topuria has done up until maybe, let's say, the last 6 or 8 weeks, he's been saying, Arman is basically dirt beneath my feet. He's
totally
nothing
dismissing
to me.
him.
Dismissing him. He's a nobody, whatever.
Sure.
I'm going to knock Justin Gaethje out, then I'm going to fight Islam Makhachev. Now, all of a sudden, Ilia is starting to say, I don't need the Islam fight for my legacy. And I don't disagree with him, by the way. Like, obviously, you go up and you beat Islam Makhachev, you're the greatest of all time.
Right.
But if you stay at 155, and I think the reason that he's starting to have those kinds of conversations is because he sees how big of a star Arman is becoming.
Yeah.
He thinks that he can beat Arman. A lot of people would also think the same thing. Now, you said Ilia is going to be in for a long night when he fights Arman, and I don't disagree. I do believe that Ilia is an elite grappler, but I believe Arman is just a level above after what I'm seeing on these RAF mats.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, can Arman hang on the feet, enough to get the fight to the ground and do what he does there? But, I think that Ilia Topuria is not just having these conversations about not needing the Islam Makhachev for no reason. That's not by mistake.
Right.
Ilia doesn't do anything by mistake.
Right.
Ilia is a big star. So I think that he's seeing how big that fight with him and Tsarukyan actually is going to be.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? At the end of the day, if the Islam thing doesn't happen for me, if that's not going to be in my career and on my resume, having Arman Tsarukyan and defending the belt against him is big enough to be a marquee fight in, let's say, end of 2026 and beginning of 2027.
Yeah, the biggest fight Ilia Topuria can have right now is Islam Makhachev for triple belt status, triple champ, the first ever to do it undisputed, not
No
Alex
question.
Pereira's interim. But the second biggest fight is Arman Tsarukyan. Now, the only way to leapfrog Islam in this situation and actually have Ilya's trajectory of his career even get more rich and more impressive is if Ilia Topuria beats Justin Gaethje, goes up to 170, win or lose, go back and fight Arman Tsarukyan afterwards. If he goes up and beats Islam Makhachev and says, look, Michael Morales, Carlos Prates, Ian Gary, these guys are simply too big. I never had them on my radar. I had Islam on my radar because he was the 155 champ and I wanted to fight Islam. But if he decides after one fight at 170 that he's going to go back down to 155, I would assume that in that time that he moves up to 170, they're going to put Arman Tsarukyan in an interim title fight, and then the guy with the belt will be Arman Tsarukyan at 155, and then Ilia Topuria has the perfect path after the Islam Makhachev potential fight to go back down, and that's the only way I see the Arman fight getting bigger than Islam Makhachev's fight with Ilia. Ilia versus Islam right now needs to happen because we know Islam probably only has 2, 3, maybe 4 fights left if we're lucky, and now people are even talking about him going to 185, so we can't put 2 divisions in between those guys. We need to see Ilia and Islam, but whether Ilia loses that fight or wins it, I think the best thing he could do would be go back down to 155 and fight Arman Tsarukyan, who at this point has gotten all of the attention and love from the masses. And the UFC does listen to the fans. They do listen to the analytics. Even if they don't care what the fans say, at least the numbers will reflect what they feel. And if Arman Tsarukyan continues this generational run, he is going to wind up with an interim or an undisputed title around his waist, whether he has to fight Ilia Topuria for it or not. And I think if he does get in that situation, and let's say they strip Ilia Topuria, and Ilia has to come back to try to regain his belt, that's the fight. And it could actually be the biggest fight the UFC could make after the Islam and Ilia fight.
Yeah, well, the thing that's so unique and rich about Ilia Topuria is he's chasing fighters, not chasing belts.
Right.
And he's getting belts as a consequence of that, right? So he vacated 145 very quickly. He's like, you know what? I don't want to make this weight anymore. I'm done. I'm going up to 55. I'd like to fight Islam. Oh, Islam's at 170. He's the guy I really want. Yes, of course, I'll fight Justin Gaethje, but I want that fight with Islam. If I need to vacate the belt, no problem. I'll vacate it. I want to fight him.
Right.
And so why is that so different than everybody else? Everybody else has always been like, what's my easiest path to the belt?
Right.
And then once I get the belt, how do I pick and choose who I fight to keep the belt?
Right.
And to me, the legacy is so much more rich when you're like, the belts will come. It's almost like they say when you work hard, you know, money and success and all that come as a byproduct.
Right.
But when you're chasing money and success, you know, you kind of lose sight of your mission.
Yeah, just to pile onto that too real quick, Ilia doesn't even care about the belts, and it's clear that he's supposed to be the BMF champion right now, and he just doesn't have the belt, but he did beat the BMF, and it wasn't on the line, so you're right about that he's going for competition against certain people, not just belt chasing. And that famous line, I know we talked about Chael earlier, but bringing it up again, Chael always says, and it's a famous line, I want to fight the easiest guy for the most amount of money, as high up on the card as I possibly can. Ilia's like, I'm going to be at the top of the biggest card in the world, Freedom 250, and everything else after that and before that, I'm going to be the main event guy. But I don't care about the easiest guy. I want the hardest matchups because at the end of the day, he's undefeated, and the one thing that he wants is GOAT status. And if he could be the guy to put the end to the conversation of GOAT status, at least for the time being, you know, right now, some people have GSP, some people have Anderson Silva, some people have John Jones. I have John Jones. But if Ilia Topuria goes and gets that third belt and he can somehow retire undefeated, he is the GOAT.
Yeah, no question about it. He would be the GOAT at that point in time, and I don't think there'd be much debate. But let's jump back into the recapping of some of the excitement that we saw this weekend, this time in BKFC. Darren Till putting on him and Mike Perry, and that's who he called out, I think are putting, and obviously you would have to add Francis into the mix for the amount of money, the sheer amount of money he's made. But the 2 or 3 of those guys are crafting the best careers imaginable outside of the UFC.
Yeah, post-UFC career, right?
Right. These guys are probably, and not probably, for sure Francis is, but I think also Till and Perry are making more money than they ever made in the UFC, and by a pretty wide margin. He fought Aaron Chalmers last night. Aaron Chalmers is a reality show guy turned MMA fighter. Now, he's had some MMA fights. He's had some, you know, he's been around the block. So I don't want to be like, okay, he's a CM Punk type of guy.
No.
He's had a few fights. He's got some road underneath him.
He was in Bellator.
But he's not Darren Till level.
No.
Darren Till looked good last night.
Yeah, and I love that you said he's not Darren Till level, because Ilia Topuria was asked in an interview not too long ago who he would use if he had to create the perfect fighter. And I can't remember all the stats, like who's wrestling, who's jiu-jitsu, who's boxing, who's overall striking, and all the different attributes, right? Who's gas tank. So Merab was the gas tank. John Jones landed on a couple of the slots. And then they said something about boxing, and I think he said Darren Till. And that just, I've always thought Darren Till was an electric striker, very high level. When he fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, everybody realized just how good he actually was. And Darren Till, to me, always felt like the guy, maybe it was the accent, maybe it was the brashness, maybe it was his ability just command attention. I thought that if there was a guy that could come and become the next Conor McGregor, it was going to be Darren Till. Now, he never panned out the way I thought he would in the UFC, but I'm so happy to see that his post-UFC career is just shooting up like a rocket, not only for the money, like he's making more money, like you said, than he ever did in the UFC, but he's also got this new confidence. That was the best his body's ever looked, and he's fighting in multiple different organizations with all different rule sets. Right? We've seen him flatline people in boxing. We've seen him look really good as of last night in BKFC. And as a matter of fact, he called out the #1 guy in BKFC in Mike Perry. You know, Mike is the face of bare knuckle fighting championship.
He's Mr. Violence himself.
He's the king of violence. And Darren Till versus Mike Perry is, I would have loved it, you know, back in the day in the UFC. But the fact that we can see that at BKFC in today's climate makes it even more exciting. And I love seeing good things happen to guys like Mike Perry and Darren Till.
No, I'm the opposite. Give me that fight in BKFC over MMA all day long.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, yes, of course, if those two guys did MMA, would that be fun? Definitely. But I feel like Mike Perry versus Darren Till in bare knuckle is chaos and violence personified. The thing about Darren Till is he is such a high-level boxer with his hands.
Yeah.
And he ate a shot last night. Aaron Chalmers, to give him credit, he put a good shot on him.
He won the first round by sitting Darren Till down.
Exactly. And then Darren comes back, got a great chin, able to weather the storm. But that straight two that he timed so beautifully on the entry there by Chalmers shows you how accurate and high level he is.
Yeah, and so Chalmers was a little bit predictable, and you could see in his shoulders he was very stiff when that first round started. And you know, he's doing the thing that a lot of guys who are at his level do, where it's a little bit too much movement, a little bit of herky jerkiness, overly feinting but not utilizing any of it, just making sure, it's almost like he's making sure everything works. All systems are a go before I start going with a guy at Darren Till's level. So he did do a beautiful technique in knocking Darren Till's lead hand down and then coming across with that hook. It was enough to sit Darren Till down. So that was probably an eye-opening experience for him. He's like, damn, I just got Darren Till on the canvas and a standing 8 count. Very impressed with himself, but his tendencies were very predictable. And a guy like Darren Till, with his vision and his ability to see what you're doing to make his reads, he only needed about 6 or 8 seconds in that second round to wait for Chalmers to commit with something and then step back and throw that beautiful shot down the pipe. The coolest part about BKFC, in my opinion, is the way people can win. BKFC is one of those situations where you can't throw as hard as you would if you had a boxing glove on, or even an MMA glove, right? 4 ounces is enough to protect your hands, not enough to protect their face. But you have to be real precise with your shots. Darren Till landed a very nice shot. It didn't knock Aaron Chalmers unconscious, but it did enough damage to where he couldn't answer the standing 8 count. And that's just so interesting. It's a unique aspect of combat sports that we don't get to see every day. Most guys, if he would have got popped with that same shot in a 4-ounce glove, he likely would have stood back up, or he likely would have figured something out. But the fact that it's just pure knuckle on the face, landing flush, that, you know, you're fully coherent and aware, and you're like, oh yeah, I am definitely done with this fight for the night, and I will live to fight another day. But it's one of those one of those unique experiences in BKFC where you can see a guy who's just taken serious damage decide right then and there that I am done with this situation. And it's got to feel good for a guy like Darren Till to put that kind of shot on somebody and have them quit during the standing 8 count.
Yeah, for sure. So I think definitely Till versus Perry. You got to make that fight
100%.
next. And then let's move into the boxing match that happened last night.
Right here in Houston.
Right here in Houston, a friend of ours, friend of the channel, been interviewed right here in these not these chairs, the old chairs we used to have, but the old studio. Very, very decent human being, had some troubles in his life, righted the ship, and is now looking as good as ever. Oshaki, Ice Water Foster.
Yes, sir.
Raymond Ford. Now, to Raymond's credit, he brought the fight.
Yeah.
Right? That was a good first half of the fight.
Yeah.
Shock ran away with it at the end. The 114-114 scorecard I want to get into in a minute, that's a BS scorecard. It should have never been a draw. It wasn't even close to a draw. 118-110 may have been a little bit generous in Shock's favor. I think the judge that had it closer but in favor of Shock was probably the right one. Regardless of that, we got to talk fight. We got to talk technique. You're the best at that. But even more so after we talk technique, Shakur Stevenson versus O'Shaquie Foster, that's got to be the next fight.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that, but there was so much on the technique aspect of this fight that we have to get into. So if I'm long-winded, I apologize. But no, O'Shaquie Foster, in my opinion, is truly and has been one of the top 5 most skilled boxers on the planet, regardless of weight class. He just never had his shine, right? There's certain guys that just blow up as far as stardom is concerned. Think of like the Devin Haney's and
Tiafimo, Ryan Garcia.
Exactly. And they're all around that same weight. Most of them started around 130 and they've ventured up to 140. O'Shaquie is the 130 champion and he's so talented. We've been saying it at Main Street for years. Like, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that's more skilled than O'Shaquie. I don't think there's anybody with a higher fight IQ for boxing than Shock. And he just was on full display last night. If you ever have a fight where you need somebody to become a fan of boxing, that's the one to show him, because there was animosity, right? There was a real competitive nature between these two guys. Remember, Shakur Stevenson is here. He lives and trains in Houston. Raymond Ford lives and trains here in Houston. Houston is a fight town to the highest level. And so there's like this, turf battle.
Crosstown beef, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so fun. I love that they made the fight happen here in Houston. And obviously the crowd was slightly pro-Shock, but Shock was able to go out there, even with the tensions and emotions running high because there's beef between the camps and all that stuff, and perform. And I want to give Raymond his credit too. I thought that he rose to the occasion, at least for the first 7 or 8 rounds. He was able to hang with, in my opinion, the best boxer in the world and even win a couple rounds. But Shock was able to listen to his coaches. Shout out Coach Bobby Benton, Aaron Navarro, all the guys that from Main Street that make Shock into the fighter that he is.
Some of the best in the game.
Truly the best in the game. And if you're asking me, my biased opinion, the best coaches and best gym in the world. But they give him such sound advice in the corners, and then he actually goes and uses it. There was one moment, I can't remember which round it was in between, but, Shock is very good with all of his defense, right? He can go high guard. He can sit back in a Philly shell. He can pull just out of range and get his head just out of the way of shots. And then even the most impressive defensive technique he was using was that check step. Every now and again, he'd put a check hook on the step, but most of the time it was just land your couple shots and then check step away, and he was causing Raymond Ford to just miss by about a half an inch. Really beautiful stuff. But there was a couple shots that wound up getting a little bit too close for comfort, and Coach Bobby Benton was like, you know what, Shock, instead of pulling back on every one of those shots, start to roll under it. And sure enough, in that next round that happened, whenever the opportunity arose, Shock slid under the hook. And I'm like, man, this guy is not only so skilled and so good everywhere, but he's so damn coachable. He's like coherent in the corner, listening. He's conversing back and forth with the coaches, and they know exactly what their fighter needs to hear in the short 60 seconds they have. They were giving him such sound advice, and he was going out there and performing. And one thing that separates great boxers in the world from world champions is their ability to keep that pace up from the opening bell to the final bell, but then even turn it up a little bit as the rounds become championship rounds. And as you take these lesser experienced guys into rounds that they're less familiar with, rounds 11 and 12 are considered the championship rounds in boxing. And Shock was able to shine in those last 2 rounds. Yeah. Really, really impressed by him. And I think that the Shakur fight is next. Obviously, I want to hear your thoughts on the fight itself as well. But that fight was all but made. The only difference is 10 pounds of weight. Shakur is a big name at 140. Shock is the biggest name at 130 and the most skilled. So I would love to see them meet up potentially at 135, but I know Shock and I know the kind of person he is. He wouldn't bat an eye if they said, you got to go up and fight Shakur Stevenson at 140.
Yeah. So quick synopsis on the fight. I think Shock might be one of the most defensively sound fighters in the world.
So good.
Unbelievable with head movement, with the way he uses his guard, the way he uses the shell. You said it, the high guard at times, the pull. He's so coachable. Bobby Benton, one of the best, if not the best coach in all of boxing, brilliant boxing mind. It's almost like he's controlling a video game character because that's how responsive Shaq is to coaching. I need you to, instead of pull, I need you to roll. Boom. What does he do? Immediately rolls. How many times do you see coaches literally give advice and the fighter goes out there and does exactly what they told them not to do? It's just like the Tyson Fury said when he fought Deontay Wilder. I don't care about his new coach and what he's got him doing, because as soon as I hit him, he's going to revert right back to his old ways. And Deontay Wilder's a high-level former champion. That's exactly what happened. So getting somebody to listen and to be coachable is incredible. All I got to say is, has Shaq been watching the MMA class a little too closely? Has he been doing some wrestling with you guys? What the heck happened? I mean, Raymond Ford, I thought he was going into the cheap seats there at one point in time.
Yeah, it was crazy to see. And obviously, you know, Main Street is rich in boxing history. And as of the past decade or longer, MMA has become one of the major aspects of Main Street. And we've got people at the highest level of both boxing and MMA, and even BKFC, shout out Austin Trout, another friend of the channel. But yeah, it's so fun to me because every day that I'm in there, I get to be with Austin Trout. I get to be with O'Shaquie Foster. And you can't help but, when I'm watching Shaq spar Regis Prograis, or when I'm watching him spar Austin Trout, I get to, you know, it's like, man, I would pay $80 to watch this on pay-per-view, and instead I'm getting to stand ringside and watch it for free. But then it's really cool on the same aspect where those guys who are high-level boxers will jump into some flow sparring rounds with the MMA guys. And you know,
you did a lot of stuff with Regis back in the day. You wrestled with him, you boxed with him.
Whenever he was getting ready for Zepeda, that was a unorthodox southpaw, and that I can answer the call when they need somebody like that. Which, you know, it would have been fun to get in there with and emulate Raymond Ford a little bit, but I didn't work with Shaq for this camp. But yeah, I was so blown away with his ability to fight. But I really did love that he was like, nah, we're in a fight. This isn't just some boxing match. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna rough this young guy up. And you know, everybody knows that beautiful, you know, throw a combination, step off to the side, and then pull their torso and kind of let them go that way. It's almost like that Beyblade toy that kids used to have, like spin them around and then go on the other side. Shaq was doing that tactic all night long, where he'd throw 3 or 4 punches and then shift off to the side, and he's off on an angle where he was unable to be hit really well. But the very first one happened in that first round, and he just happened to grab a full grip of Raymond Ford, plus put a little bit of hand behind his back and send him right into the judge's lap. And it looked like it could have been a very dangerous or bad fall, but I think Raymond was able to land on his hands and sort of just slide down like he was at Great Wolf Lodge on a water slide or something.
It did look like a weird slide, didn't it? But okay, so let's move into Shakur Stevenson, because that was what, obviously you have Navarrete, right? You're talking about unifying 130. The biggest glaring thing to me last night was the size difference. Yeah. Now, should they make Shaq versus Shakur? 100%. Yes. The beef is there. This is a huge. I know Shakur is from New Jersey, but he spends a lot of time in Houston. Shaq is from Orange, Texas, but he lives and trains here in Houston. I mean, this would be a grudge match to the highest level.
Take it to the Toyota Center.
Let me tell you something. These two guys are equally skilled. Yeah. The only difference maker here to me is the size for Shakur, which is why I would like to see it at 135 instead of 140. I know the fighter and the person that Shaq is, he's going to go to 140. I think, unfortunately, that will not favor him as well. But if this fight gets made at 135, I will be checking call sheet myself, because I almost can guarantee that they're not going to do justice to O'Shaquie Foster, and he's going to be a huge underdog. Make no mistake about it, O'Shaquie Foster would be a 100% a live dog against Shakur Stevenson, especially if the fight happens at 135. I understand the Navarrete fight is there, but when a big fight, boxing's kind of having a moment right now. We're making big fights happen. You know, when a big fight can be made, make the damn fight.
Yeah, Shakur Stevenson versus O'Shaquie Foster is the fight to make. I don't think we need to see them fight anybody else in between then. They made the fight. They had the viral moment. Everybody saw Shakur Stevenson was quite emotional when he walked into that cage, and it was a whole bunch of curse words and no respect shown to O'Shaquie Foster.
No handshake from Shakur.
No handshake. And that's the one thing, is don't disrespect a guy. Like, yeah, you can go drum up some business. You can have a little bit of fun. You can get in the ring and talk a little smack, but don't disrespect him when he just put a clinic on your boy, your teammate, and he just defended his world title. That was his 8th world title fight that Shak's been in. And everybody knows that those two have sparred before. And if you've heard the stories, I mean, everybody knows also that you aren't supposed to talk about sparring and what it looks like in the gym when you're doing rounds. And nobody really puts that much weight into sparring rounds. But I will tell you, there were some rounds at Main Street between Shakur and O'Shaquie Foster, and a lot of people have talked about it online. So the fact that Shakur at the very beginning goes, "I made you quit," and Shak's like, "Boy, no, you didn't. I made you quit." And then now everybody goes, "Okay, well, we need to know who quit. Who quit on who was able to make the other one stop." And I think that those guys made the fight. Look, the fight between Ford and Shak was very entertaining. But that moment after the fight solidified the job for the future for both of them. And look, Shakur Stevenson may be 10 pounds above, but if he's calling out a guy who's a world champion and at that level, and a guy as game as O'Shaquie Foster, I say you make the fight, because one guy losing or one guy getting injured or having to take some time off could take all of that away. And when you have such organic, natural promotion being created like that, you got to run with it. And I think boxing, given the fact that we're seeing some better matchups being made over the past couple of years than we saw certainly in the past, I think they better just run with that right now.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. And the Navarrete fight can happen if it needs to happen. If Shak needs to vacate to go up, he can always come back down. He's not that big of a guy. We've been with him in person. He's very trim. He's very muscular, but he's not a huge frame. He could go up to 140 or 135 and he could then come back down.
100%.
So that fight's going to be there. He's still got many, many years ahead of him of being in his prime. So I like it. I say let's make it. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap. You got anything else?
Yeah, well, just make no mistake. Like, as soon as a fight's over for a world title holder like O'Shaquie Foster, a lot of people like to take a few months off and go relax a little bit. Shak, whether he is in there and has somebody walk into the ring and start a promotion for the next fight with him or not, he is always in the gym. He is always training. And the fact that Shakur went in there and lit the fuse, I have a feeling Shak is going to be more than ready whenever that call comes. I just hope that boxing doesn't delay it, and I hope we do see that one next.
Agreed. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed. As a reminder, please tune in on Monday. Nick is going live. That is tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central Time, Matchmaker Monday. Maybe you'll even throw the boxing in there for this one. I think I know who you're going to pick for Shak.
I definitely will.
So we'll have some fun matchups based on the fights that happened this weekend. We'll probably do bare knuckle, the boxing match, and then, of course, several of the fighters, winners and losers on the UFC Macau card. It's a fun live chat. It's really growing by the week, so come hang out. It's a chance to chat with Nick in person. He answers every comment that comes through, so we hope to see you there. And then midweek, we have a deep dive, Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje, just like the co-main event deep dive that we did last week, so look out for that. And until then, have a wonderful day.
See you all tomorrow night. Peace.